Hey everybody, I am recording this video to discuss what I think World of Tanks needs to do to stay relevant now that War Thunder has started releasing a little bit of beta footage on what its ground forces game looks like. And in the last couple days, some of the people that paid their way into the beta have been releasing a couple videos, and Gaijin have been showing their own videos of what the gameplay looks like, and it looks pretty stunning. It looks really nice. So at first here, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what I think Wargaming is doing right with World of Tanks, and in the next part I'm going to talk about a little about what they're doing wrong, in my opinion. So right now, they're looking to combat the War Thunder menace by doing a few different things. So some of the things World of Tanks has going for it right now are they're going to be increasing all of the poly counts from currently anywhere from about 10,000 polygons up to 30 to 50,000 polygons. So you're looking at some more higher polygon models that are going to be coming down the pipe, and that should be for the 9.0 update. They've been messing around with Havoc, which is a standalone physics engine that you can implement into your game. So they bought a license for that, and they are implementing that into the game, which will allow you to ram into walls, and they will dynamically crumble. You can shoot buildings, and they will dynamically crumble in and look a lot more realistic than just the canned kind of break off in 3 to 4 part chunks that the buildings currently do. You can even shoot some of the buildings that are like the 4-story ones, and they will actually start breaking. So the Havoc stuff seems to be pretty neat. The team battle stuff, I think, has been a pretty good addition to World of Tanks, and I think it's kind of led a lot of people to understand a little bit more about what their esports thing is going for. I think World of Tanks also does a really good job just by having a whole ton of tanks. They have that over War Thunder for sure. I mean, War Thunder's only got 2 branches of tanks right now, and that happens to be just the Germans and the Russian tanks. So, and a lot of them are just 2 or 3 versions of the same thing. So you're not going to get a whole ton of variation in the tanks in War Thunder quite yet, but it's kind of assured that will be coming. So another thing that I think Wargaming does pretty decently is they have a pretty good community kind of going. I'm not sure if War Thunder's community is quite as strong as what Wargaming is able to put together, so I think that's another good thing that they do well. The variety of maps is also going to be huge, probably compared to what's in War Thunder at the moment. But at the same time, the maps in World of Tanks are pretty small. They're more like Counter-Strike maps as far as how big they are. And one other thing I think Wargaming's got a fair bit better at lately is trying to fix bad maps. They just did a bunch of fixes to a bunch of maps and removed maps like Highway that just didn't work very well. Oh, not Highway, but Port. Highway's another one that needs to go. But they fixed maps like El Haluf, and I think that goes a long way in showing that they are listening to some things, but in other ways they aren't really listening at all. So now I'm going to jump onto the things I think that Wargaming is doing particularly wrong. And if anyone knows who Sidestrafe is, he's another YouTube video maker, and he's really kind of dropped off the radar as far as playing World of Tanks. This is like November, December. He's just kind of burned out on it. And that brings me to things that I like about War Thunder compared to World of Tanks. And primarily that has a lot to do with map size and World of Tanks' game mechanic or design decision to have invisible tanks, which is also a byproduct of having a semi-inferior engine that seems to be incapable of rendering tanks past 500 meters. Which, in this day and age, really doesn't cut it anymore. I remember playing Battlefield 2 10 years ago, and I could see tanks from across the map, and there really isn't an excuse anymore. Invisible tanks that are 300 meters in front of you it just doesn't cut it, and a lot of people feel that way, and I fully understand that, that's a game design decision that they've made, and they think it's a strong part of the game and it makes the game better, but I really don't like it. I really think that change needs to be made, and for them to stay relevant against a game like War Thunder Ground Forces that's only going to get stronger and better, I think they need to bite the bullet some point here and either do a hardcore mode or just phase out invisible tanks altogether, because it's just no good. So another thing I'd like to talk about a bit is the bad balancing of higher tiers, and just the overuse of when they decided to make APCR and heat ammo purchasable by credits. So anyone who gets into a tier 8 game can pretty much know that if you get a tier 8 game, you're fine when you're tier 8. If you get into a tier 10 game when you're tier 8, you can pretty much just kiss your ass goodbye, because you're going to have tanks shooting at you with well over 300 to 350 penetration, and it's just not very fun. They need to do a lot in rebalancing some of the higher tiers, I don't know, and making armor more relevant in the game again, because right now there's so many tank destroyers in every game that I'm playing that it's really just, it's kind of boiling it down to who can hide in the corners of the map because they know they can't get flanked, and it's just not very fun a lot of the time. A lot of the newer maps that they're introducing and fixes and updates to maps like Steppes is a lot better now. Tundra is another one of my most favorite maps because it has multiple choke points. But then you'll get into other maps where you only have 3 choke points, like Cliff. Really campy maps or corner-hugging maps where medium tanks really can't do anything. Or a map like Siegfried Line, where if you're in a scout tank, you might as well just sit in the field and scout for 15 minutes until your team either wins or the other team comes over and destroys you. Or you can go in the city and try and flank people and fight it out that way. But there's just certain things about the higher tiers that are just not balanced properly, and I think they need to do a reevaluation on, with the APCR. And a fix that I would make for that is really just to cap the amount of APCR rounds that you're able to carry in your tank. Like, honestly, there's people out there in the higher tier clans, and they only use the overpowered tanks, and all they're going to do is shoot the higher ammo to win, because they have a lot of money. They have infinite amount of credits coming from clan wars and the collusion that goes on with clan wars to hold the high gold provinces and stuff. So at the end of the day, I really think Wargaming needs to do a lot better job at fixing the higher tiers. And that also has a lot to do with fixing the overpowered and underpowered tanks in the game. Right now, Wargaming really does a really awful poor job at making the tanks work properly. Like, for instance, tanks like the KV-1S, obviously not balanced properly at all, and their metrics should show that. Anyone who plays the game should be able to tell that, but they just leave it the way it is. Tanks like the Hellcat, the T-49, the T-18 at Tier 2. There's a lot of tanks in this game that they're just not, they need to be reevaluated. They need to take a really, really good look at a lot of the tanks in this game, especially in the upper tiers. The lower tiers don't really matter as much because you go through them so quickly, but some of the underpowered tanks really need to get a little push up. And I don't know. I just get disappointed every patch when they don't fix the KV-1S and they don't fix a lot of the things that are broken. And instead they'll just add 5 more medium tier 10 Russian tanks. And that brings me to another thing that kind of bugs me, is the tanks like the Sherman Firefly still aren't in the game. And that just doesn't cut it for me anymore, when they keep adding more completely irrelevant tier 9 Russian medium tanks with rear-mounted turrets, and now they have 3 medium Russian tier 10 medium tanks. It just kind of makes me doubt the design process and the thought process that goes on within the company. Maybe it's just more important for the Russian audience to have more Russian tier 10 tanks than historically relevant tanks like the Firefly. And that may fly for them, but people in other parts of the world and historic people and historians and stuff, it's just kind of sad at this point that that tank's not in the game. Another thing that I think World of Tanks is really going to take a shot in the crotch about is how small their maps are. And again, that's a design decision, and it's a problem with their engine as well. It just can't handle bigger maps. Their maps are going to look pretty punily small compared to what's in War Thunder. War Thunder has very, very huge maps, very expansive, with really huge sight lines like rocks, trees, and you have to see your enemy to get shot. Like, you can see the big huge tracer arcing in from across the map to try and hit you as well. Unlike in World of Tanks, tanks can shoot you from stealth, completely invisible, through an entire forest, and you don't even get to see a flash from the shot coming out. You don't get to see a tracer from where it's coming from. You just get to see nothing. So I think that's another big problem with World of Tanks as compared to what's in War Thunder. They really need to get on the horse, get some bigger maps in there, get rid of the invisible tanks, and really kind of reevaluate what they want their game to be. I think you can have a lot of small maps, that's fine, but you need to start introducing more bigger maps, and you gotta, in my opinion, like, they don't have to do any of this, and they probably won't. But at the end of the day, I think their maps are just way too small compared to what gamers are going to be introduced to when they play War Thunder. And a big map isn't better just because it's big, but when you play World of Tanks, you soon realize kind of what the game turns into when you get so many tanks just camping in the back. And that's what the really, really bad and sometimes what the really, really good players will do. They know the game mechanics to hide and double bush, and it works, and it's fine if you want to play that way, but it really, really hobbles the game a little bit. And the last thing I'd like to talk about is scout tanks. I like the fast tanks. Anyone who watches my videos knows I like to blast around in the quicker stuff, and I'm a little bit more adverse to the kind of couch-style TD tank play that goes on in the game. And I think scouts really need to have a rebalance, because when I'm in a tier 7 scout like my WZ131, I think it's fine that I can blast around in a tier 8 game and I feel fairly relevant still. When my scout tank is in a tier 10 game, it's completely irrelevant almost, because basically every medium tank in the game can pretty much go as fast as I can or faster. If I'm a Chaffee, almost all of them are faster because it only goes 56. You'll get a Leopard 2 that's going 65. A number of the Russian tanks do 55 or 60. So you don't get the speed. What else don't you get? You also don't get a medium tank gun, so you're not doing as much damage either. You're not doing the same penetration either, which is fine. Scout tanks aren't supposed to, but they're supposed to be faster. Another thing that scout tanks don't seem to get is what is it they don't seem to get? The view range. Yes, that's what I was going to talk about. You'd think a scout tank, if it was to exist in a tier 10 game, that you'd take the scout tank and go, okay, balancing wise, this medium tank here, it has, let's say, 400 view range. So let's take all the medium tanks and give them 400 or 410 or 420 view range. So that's problematic to me, because suddenly you're taking away the scout's speed advantage is gone. You're taking away its view range advantage. That's gone. Basically, the only thing that you're giving them is a somewhat better camo value at speed. And honestly, that just doesn't cut it. And on a lot of maps where you do have to fight it out, like on Siegfried Line, the scout tanks become fairly irrelevant. Like, you can still do damage, you can still do things in a scout tank, but you're just basically doing it worse than you would be in a medium tank, because there just aren't any advantages to being in a scout tank anymore. And they really need to take a really good hard look at how they're going to try and make that better in the game, because right now it just doesn't work. That's why I like playing the scout tanks and the team battles and stuff, because they're relevant at that level. You can still penetrate guys, you can blast around, you're really fast, and you don't have tier 10 medium tanks doing exactly what you can do, but doing it better in almost every single way, except for camo value on the move. So at the end of the day, those are the big things I think that wargaming really needs to take a look at. And yeah, I'd like to hear your opinion. If you got a bunch of ideas or things that you think wargaming does really well, or you think that War Thunder does better, or you think War Thunder is going to suck, or you think that World of Tanks is the suck, just dump it down in the credits. Tell me what you think. And, throw those comments out there, and maybe wargaming will start to listen to some of it. And, this isn't a trashing of wargaming or anything. I think there's a lot of great stuff in World of Tanks, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed, and it's getting there, but it's not. I'm kind of on the fence now whether I think it's going to get there fast enough, and whether, certain players, even players like Sidestrafe, he's kind of like, I don't even know if I'm going to keep playing World of Tanks. He's kind of done with it, and War Thunder is the game he wants to play. And there's a lot of things that I like about War Thunder that just seem to get ignored with World of Tanks. So I don't see myself quitting World of Tanks, but I do see myself kind of maybe backing off how much I'm playing it and starting to take a look at some other games. And just, there are other games with tanks in them now. I don't have to just play World of Tanks. There's lots of other games out there. There's Battlefield 4. Maybe they'll do a more historic game that's based on World War II again with, more amount of tanks and stuff. So at the end of the day, that's just my opinion. Let me know, guys, what you think. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.